Hello, and welcome to Recent Activity, your new favorite entertainment review podcast that attempts to cover every film, every show, all at once. I am your co-host, Andrew Morgan. This is a very special instant reaction episode for Hollywood's biggest night, the 97th Academy Awards, which saw Anora make history with its Best Picture win, one of 5 on the night. To break down everything from the telecast to the big winners and losers, I have brought on the Duke of Bettingham, David Long, a man I've been talking Oscars with for several years now. Excellent source for Oscar betting and really knows his stuff with all the history and big storylines. He was kind enough to talk with me immediately following the Oscars, even though it was 4 a.m. his time in England. What a trooper. So let's not waste a moment. And let's get to my conversation, the Oscar breakdown with David Long. All right, with me on the other line, one of my favorite guys, a frequent Oscar betting guest on Mike, and Oscar, co-host of Is It Worth It, a film podcast, and currently being played by Bill Skarsgård, Mr. David Long. How are you, sir?
It is a great privilege to be behind a microphone, and particularly behind the microphone with such a great man like yourself. It is.
Sure.
I don't know what to say. It's late in the UK, or is it early? It's 4 a.m. here.
Oof.
However, it's the perfect hour to discuss what we've just seen. An action-packed Oscars Sunday. Lots of things we expected, maybe some things we didn't expect. But as always, a pretty entertaining show and a great end, as always, to a really exciting and enthralling award season.
Yes, and of course, I do eventually want to hear from you in terms of how well your Oscar betting may have gone for the evening as well. Because I can't have the Duke of Bettingham. Reminder to everyone, a name that I came up with on my old podcast, the Nomcast. So just want to throw that out for everybody. But well earned, sir, because you have now turned that into an art form. First and foremost, I just want to hear your instant reaction to kind of, now that the show has ended, we're doing this right after. And I mean, it's a huge night for Anora, 5 wins. And this has just been such an odd year with the precursors where everything was so spread out. And yet, I believe, this is kind of a little chalky for the show outside of Mikey Madison. So what did you think about the night? Because I think the spread out nature of how everything went really represented itself in the night.
Yeah, absolutely. So what was very clear in the UK coverage, so during the intervals in the States, the ITV coverage came back to a studio here in the UK. We were having a running tally of the Oscars where they'd gone, and it was very, very even. And it was one of those Oscars nights where the love was spread, and it was spread pretty widely, but at the same time, there was one sort of obvious, you're stating the obvious, it won Best Picture, but more than that, with Madison winning Best Actress, and also with Anora winning Editing, that was the real victory of the night. I mean, there was, as always, an Oscars puzzle theory. Was, director going to go elsewhere and Anora would still win Picture? I think the writing was really on the wall earlier in the night when Anora did win Editing because, as you say, I'm the Duke of Bettingham, which I have to thank you, by the way, because you came up with that name, and it is an incredible name, and it's one that stuck, and it's one that will stay with me until the day I perish. And
the shirts are getting made, sir.
Conclave was a betting favourite. It was a short price odds-on favourite to win Editing, and I'd been pretty confident on Conclave all season. I basically told people not to sleep on it and that I thought it had a bigger shout in Best Picture than a lot of people were giving it credit. However, early in the night when it lost Editing to Anora, that's when I knew Conclave's Best Picture hopes had probably gone. And to be honest, once Anora had started to steamroll in those major categories, I did have major concerns for Demi Moore. I predicted Mickey Madison on Mike, and Oscar. She was 2-1, so I had a bet there. And yeah, in terms of my other bets, obviously, regular listeners of MMNO will know that I don't like particularly betting short prices, so I do tend to look for a bit more value.
Right.
And essentially, we've had a winning night, and a relatively good winning night, mostly because of the win of The Only Girl in the Orchestra in Best Documentary Short, which I backed at 8-1. So, $100 on at 8-1, you win $800, you get $900 back. So, look, any 8-1 winner is a good winner, and that was a nice win for me. And to be fair, I thought it had a very good chance. I thought it was priced up wrong, and over the last few days, it's been consistently backed. Obviously, we had some losing bets as well, but you take that on the chin. That's part of the game. Overall, it's always tough to assess an Oscars ceremony because people like us, film enthusiasts, we're going to watch it anyway.
Right.
So it's important to reflect what people like us think of the Oscars, but also your sort of bog standard, just television watcher who every year tunes into the Oscars. What did they think of it? Look, I thought there was lots of positives. I thought there was a few negatives. I do think it was still a little bit long and it could have been a bit tighter in places, but I'm sure we'll get onto it. But overall, a great night for Anora. Sean Baker wins 4 Oscars, which is very, very impressive. And a lot of people didn't think that would happen. I think a lot of people assumed that there would be a bit more spreading of the love, but Anora comes away with an unthinkable night, really. If you think of the budget of the film, the size of the movie, the sort of an independent film compared to Oppenheimer and Barbie last year, it's a polar opposite kind of Oscar win. So obviously they're going to be absolutely delighted with the night they had. It was pretty spectacular for them.
Yeah, Oppenheimer being that steamroll, making $1 billion plus, like that's just, it's something that we've come to expect a little bit. Sometimes there's always that like one big film. This wasn't that kind of year. And in fact, you made the point here, Anora is I think the lowest box office total Best Picture winner, like since like the 20s or 30, like some like in the like modern era thing, it's by far the lowest number. And this is including like, Moonlight and everything else. It's lower than all that. So that's what's wild about this. Because I don't know if it went up in the last, because usually we get that like Oscar week kind of push or anything. Last I knew it was around like $16 million, which is wild to be a winner, which is, for Sean Baker, making a lot of speeches about getting things in cinema and keeping them there and do all that stuff. I hope that they get a bump after the Oscars, like everybody thinks they need to go see it, get that little extra Oscars bump. But it's also like it's been nominated for a long time, and so it's hard to be like, we get excited about the Oscars, but I did worry tremendously about like how many people are watching this year's Oscars because there was no Barbie Oppenheimer thing, or where we're sitting here, they knew what they had to do in this program. They put Wicked right up front because they're like, please don't change the channel, watch Ariana Grande sing for a minute. And then I swear to God, Conan O'Brien will be out, there'll be jokes, and it'll be like, it helps ease people in. But now, I doubt people made it all the way through.
No, I have to say, I think the opening to this year's show was one of the best I can remember in recent years.
Agreed.
I think Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo vocally are about as good as you can be. Their performance live was incredible, and it was just such an impactful powerhouse opening. And that's important because I think we've seen in years gone by where the Oscars has got off to a clunky start, and then it almost feels like for the next half an hour, it's having to recover. Whereas this came, out of the blocks, out of the traps really, really quickly. And I thought it was a sensational opening. And I have to just touch briefly on what you said there about independent films and what Sean Baker said. I thought that was one of the speeches of the night because, look, we all know that films like Barbie and Oppenheimer are important for the industry because, they're the big bucks films. They're the ones that sell out cinemas.
Right.
And we love to see them. However, you're not going to get a Barbie and Oppenheimer every year. And what we need to do, what we have to do, what the industry has to do is get bums on seats in theatres. And it does that by funding good independent filmmakers, good independent film companies. And it does that by making cinema affordable for everyone. because essentially nobody's going to watch the Oscars if nobody's going to the cinema, you know.
Right. Yeah.
So we've got to, as much as I love Netflix and I love the ability to watch good films at home, you can't beat the theatrical cinematic experience. And I think the fact that he raised that so passionately was, for me, one of the highlights of the evening. It was a great speech.
Yeah, it's a great kind of in back-to-back years. You had last year with the American Fiction story and him being like, instead of making $100 million film, make $10 million films, and kind of preaching these smaller independent films. You can say, like, obviously American Fiction ended up kind of going through, the Amazon circle of things. But with that said, it kind of proved his point. I mean, look at what the year was. I mean, it was a lot of smaller films, the occasional blockbusters, but I mean, your Nickel Boys, your Anoras, those type of things, like those really popped up, and at least on the nomination side, and obviously Anora's big night will show it. But yeah, it's an impressive thing, and even stuff like The Substance, it's like, yes, it has to be more in it, but like a very small movie, comparatively speaking to the Wickeds of the world or any of these other ones. So that was a big phenomenon, and Conclave made good money. Like, so it's good that like we can kind of still make movies like these, and some of them will make money. They just don't obviously make what they used to, unfortunately. So as far as like the wins go, like I was shocked as these things went through that Anora was this big winner. Like a five Oscar night. You said 4 for Sean Baker specifically. And for it to kind of like have this, when not only the precursors had it spread out, especially because they got anointed by, like, say, Critics' Choice first, and people are like, well, Critics' Choice, critics don't have Oscar votes, so who cares?
Yeah.
And then you move on to like the BAFTA win for Mikey Madison, you go, huh, that's good that the European vote is a little more in their favor than we thought, maybe, even though Conclave had the bigger night there. And you could say even the Brutalists might have some fans over there. But, the fact that Anora won for Mikey Madison had some kind of charge coming out of BAFTA was something. And then obviously the steamroll of PGA, WGA, DGA, that was really where I couldn't even think, even with Conclave winning BAFTA, I was like, no, like it's still Anora to win. And then SAG, even with SAG Ensemble for Conclave, I still didn't think it was going to beat Anora after all those other things, but I knew that this year was going to be close. But that's why this tonight, like, kind of feels weird, because it was so spread out. Even last minute, Conclave having more of these wins, like, it never felt like there was a momentum that, like, the results are the results, but it never seemed like there was a huge momentum for Anora. It had like fits and starts going back from Cannes all the way to here. So let me ask you about that. Like, how do you feel about, whether it's the precursors themselves and how predictive things are, because you guys go over that stuff all the time whenever you're on Mike and Oscar, and then the fact of, like, how does this win feel to you? Because, like, did it feel like it was, it says something about this current Academy or any of these things? Like, because to me, this is a baffling win up and down. And it makes sense compared to what's here. But as a win, I don't think anything would have made sense to me as a Best Picture winner. And Anora the least, maybe.
Yeah, so a couple of points to make there. Firstly, about sort of what do I think about Anora winning and how it reflects on this Academy. I will say this. The old Academy, or an Academy of, say, 10 years ago, this would have been either Conclave or the Brutalist. They would have been the
or
two,
a complete unknown, quite frankly,
or exactly, or a complete unknown. I don't know how other than describe them as Oscar-y films, like
traditional Oscar films, Oscar bait, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah, you look at Conclave, the Brutalist, and a complete unknown. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to watch a trailer for those films and think, yeah, they're probably going to be in the play for Best Picture. Anora the complete opposite. You could watch the trailer for that, and I remember when the trailer came out and I heard people predicting it for Best Picture, and I thought, well, I don't know if the Academy's going to buy that.
Right.
So the Academy has changed, and we've seen that in recent years with things like Coda winning. I think Oppenheimer was sort of a step back to the past. That was a much more traditional Academy pick. In
Right.
terms of the precursors and what it means, for someone like myself who likes to bet on the Oscars, likes to predict the Oscars, and likes to gamble and have a bit of fun, but also try and use reason and logic, sometimes it's impossible to look at some of these precursors and make sense of it all.
Yeah.
I mean, I said on Mike and Oscar, and I'll say it again now, in terms of Golden Globe and Critics' Choice, or BAFTA and SAG Ensemble, I would always rather win a BAFTA and a SAG Ensemble or a SAG award,
Right.
simply because the British Academy does have some crossover into the Academy in America, and obviously the Screen Actors Guild is the biggest the acting branch is the biggest branch of the Academy. So, a Golden Globe win, a Critics' Choice win is a great win. It's a precursor, but they're really good for getting the ball rolling in award season. But there's no journalists, there's no critics as such in the Academy. So you can get a bit obsessed with, well, it's one Golden Globe and it's one Critics' Choice. The Producers Guild is the big one. It has the preferential ballot. Obviously, Anora won that. And to be fair, at that point, Anora did look like it was an absolute certain shoo-in for Best Picture. But Conclave then sort of pops up with the BAFTA win, with the SAG Ensemble win, and it probably actually made the race seem a little bit closer than it was. And someone like myself who's been predicting Conclave for most of the year, or at least saying I think Conclave has a better chance than people are making out, I was probably fed a bit of false hope, because the reality was, when you look at the results tonight, with it winning director, screenplay, editing, lead actress, like, that was the Best Picture winner, and it probably won it fairly convincingly. But yeah, just what I love about the Oscars is how different every year is. And you compare this to last year, you've got a film about a conclave, you've got Anora, you've got The Brutalist, Emilia Perez, sort of very more sort of gritty, independent, arts housey films, compared to Barbie and Oppenheimer last year. So yeah, the precursors are always a guide, but they're not the be all and end all. Anora was probably more comfortable than people like myself ended up making it out to seem. I thought it was vulnerable, but in reality, I was wrong there. It was probably quite a convincing winner.
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out this new Academy. And obviously, you mentioned SAG. SAG really kind of threw everybody for a loop, because it's like, yes, they don't have a Best Picture, but they have Ensemble, and Ensemble is like kind of their version. And you're sitting here going, okay, Conclave wins Ensemble, Demi Moore wins Best Actress, and Timothée Chalamet wins Best Actor, and none of those things happen at the Oscars, even though they are, one of the largest bodies of voters. So they used to be like kind of a bellwether. Like the crossover for Ensemble's a little less than, less predictive than some of these other ones. But at the same time, like, that's still, a big meatball to be like, that's one of the last things we see, and we're like, oh man, look for this upset, or look for this thing. It didn't happen. But although, the Demi Moore thing, that's, we thought that was a wrap, but that I think, it, again, should have been obvious. If you're like picking off all these other things, and you go, if you're thinking Anora's going to have a big night, well then here you go. I was thinking, I had Coda in my head a lot for this year or this particular Oscars, because I was like, all right, I remember, if you think Coda was going to win, it made no sense that they would win Best Picture and maybe just screenplay or something, and that would be the end of it, or that and like supporting for that year, or whatever it was for Best Supporting Actor. And it was like, that can't be. And then what happened? They won basically, I think, everything but one that they were nominated for, and you're like, oh, okay, this is how this happened. So I felt like Anora kind of played that hand, because again, they're not a movie that's going to be up for makeup and hairstyling or costumes. design. They're all going to be above the line, so it's going to be a harder route to get there. And so that's why editing was so key, and I picked them for editing. I went 17 for 23, by the way, and for such a spread out year, that's not so bad. I'm a little upset because I'm a competitive person, but I was just like, the shorts and animation really screwed me.
Oh, yeah.
And by the way, you'll appreciate this, David, as a person who has been on my old podcast, the Nomcast, Netflix original movie podcast all the time, and I still write about Netflix movies. And yet, The Girl in the Orchestra was one of the ones I was like, Netflix, god damn it, I should have picked it. But yeah, it's funny that that's one of the ones that got me in the end.
Yeah, well, obviously, The Girl in the Orchestra was sort of a big win for me. You know, it was a nice win, but the shorts, I think 17 for 23 is pretty solid, actually, because I mean, the shorts threw everyone's ballots, because The Only Girl in the Orchestra, yes, I was on at 8-1, but I do know that it was available at bigger prices in other books. In the Shadow of the Cypress was 50-1, like that was the rank outsider in that category. So that's the kind of price where you're looking at them all and you're thinking, well, that one's 50-1, that one just can't win. I'm Not a Robot, 7-1. So in all the shorts, there was surprises, there were shocks,
Right.
And the shorts are notoriously difficult to pick, but yeah, SAG was. Do you know what it's going to make? It's going to make next year very, very difficult when it comes to lead actor and lead actress, because everyone will go, oh well, they won the SAG, and everyone will go, oh yeah, but Timothée Chalamet won SAG last year and Demi Moore won SAG last year, and look how it ended for them. Conclave winning SAG Ensemble makes sense to me, because as an ensemble cast, that sort of makes sense. That I must confess, the Timothée Chalamet win at SAG does confuse me. Not so much the Demi Moore win, because I think a lot of people expected her to win tonight. But the Timothée Chalamet one, it was odd, because he's not really been he's had numerous nominations throughout his career, and that was actually his first major win in an award season, winning SAG.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that suddenly made people think maybe he can win Oscar. But again, actually, it was sort of giving people false hope, really, because Adrian Brody was probably a lot more solid than people realised. I must say, I did think Adrian Brody's speech was going to go on longer than The Brutalist, actually.
He was a little all over the place, and then had like this big chunk that he wanted to get done, and it just went over and over.
Yeah,
though I did like his line. I feel bad for the people playing the music.
I mean, it was,
but that was a great line to kick back at them.
It was a boss moment when he was, like, I've been here before, cut the music, I'm carrying on. And then he was like, I'll keep it brief. And it was like, but Adrian, this is not brief. Like, this is...
No.
But I suppose in comparison to The Brutalist, it was a pretty short speech.
Yeah. And I don't, we can maybe pitch this for another time, but I think as far as like the flow for the evening, I'm sick of watching the Oscars where they do stuff early where I'm like, okay, this pace seems all right. I think we're a little behind probably, and they're giving a lot of lip service to things that I'm like, you're going to end up sacrificing at the end. And this happens every year, it seems like, where they're like, oh, we'll rush through director, we'll rush through actor, or we'll limit the time. I'm like, these are the people who we came for.
Yeah.
Stop doing this. Stop giving. And again, all due to the guildsmen and men and women, and they're amazing and everything. I don't need every actor to go through every film and tell them exactly what they did with the guild, like that particular guild's person, like costume design, makeup and hair. Like they all got like shine on every single nominee. I'm like, this is going to hurt you in the end. I'm like, I don't mind it in principle, but good Lord, they took forever to get their win. Those in the past may have been zippier for sure. So that's a whole other thing, but I don't want to get bogged down by that. But one last thing on Anora, because I am very curious. You're a person, obviously, who watches a ton of movies. And the one thing when I first saw Anora, I was like, how the hell is this going to win Best Picture? And the reasons for that, even before we got to precursors and everything else, it was, this is, very sexual for usually a more prude Academy that tends to not usually go for such things. But the other thing that really kind of bothered me was all I had was Uncut Gems in my head, where I was like, this movie kind of feels and moves a lot like Uncut Gems, and yet Uncut Gems didn't have anything. Like nothing. And a movie like this comes along, and the only difference is that it's actually an even smaller movie, a smaller star, and maybe it's the Sandler effect. Like people didn't take it as seriously as it should have been back then, but it was also a stacked year, fine. But like for it to like not even really be nominated at all, and then for a movie like Anora to be a similar spirit, but even more sexual and other things, I was like, that's not going to make it. And then here we are.
Yeah, I feel exactly the same way. I've got to be honest with you. When I first saw the trailer for Anora, and I'd read in a few articles, I think from Clayton Davis and a few other sort of Oscars pundits early in the predictions, in sort of October time, September, October.
Yeah,
I thought I just can't see it.
Yeah.
Then I saw the film and I thought, well, I can understand why people are going to like this, and there's going to be a very noisy fan base on X, and there's going to be plenty of people on social media that get behind it. But is this going to appeal to the core of the Academy? A lot of times, you bring up the Uncut Gems example. I just think there's an element of luck. I just think there's an element of luck when your film comes out, what year it comes out. The amount of times I've looked at previous Oscar winners and previous Oscar losers in Best Picture, and I thought, if you just swap those films round, if you move that film that lost in 2006 into 2007, it probably wins Best Picture. And I just think Anora this year was the right film at the right time. Do I think it will go down as, an all-time, memorable Best Picture winner? No. Do I think that in most years Anora would win Best Picture? No. Do I think in some years Anora would probably not even be nominated for Best Picture? Yes. So I just think there's an element of luck. I look at Oppenheimer, for example. I think Oppenheimer was the kind of movie that 9 years out of 10, it was probably going to win Best Picture.
Absolutely.
It was just that kind of movie. Anora was the right film at the right time. And I think actually what we saw tonight when Sean Baker gave his speeches was a very, very likable man who has a passion and a love for cinema. And if the Academy knew that and that word spread, I'm not surprised that he was so popular on the ballot.
Yeah. The interesting thing, and you're right about Oppenheimer, I mean, that's just it's a mix of all kinds of old Oscar feelings that kind of just resonated. And honestly, I thought it was the best movie of the year. So I can't complain. I thought everything aligned in that way. Is it even Nolan's best movie? No. But very rarely do they, these elite directors get, everything to align to where their best film, their best work gets there. But what's interesting is now we're seeing in these last 5-6 years, how many times have we seen where it's just this one movie for a director that hasn't really been nominated before, let alone you're talking now Anora, Everything Everywhere All at Once, Parasite, all the Coda, Nomadland, all these movies are by directors who were, it's their breakout movie. Of sorts. You can make arguments, obviously, with Sean Baker being around for a while, but what are we saying? Florida Project or Red Rocket? I think Florida Project, probably had the biggest nomination with Dafoe being nominated or something. But other than that, Sean Baker largely gets ignored this time, for award season. He's a Indie Spirits case, or he's, somewhere in that realm, the Gothams, but not really playing on the main stage, so to speak. So usually there's a momentum to these things, but now it seems like one big movie, bam, you're on, the Daniels. Who the hell knew who the Daniels were before Everything Everywhere All at Once, and and so on and so forth. So this kind of seems to be a pattern of things in that nature too. Plus, this movie is also kind of dark indie comedies,
Yeah.
so to speak, too. And we talked about this in the past, David. What have I said over the last few years? The bummers don't win anymore.
I was just about to say that I think that was when we were on together, the Power of the Dog year, I think.
Right, exactly. And I was like, it's not going to win. It's a bummer. And like, we're in this post-COVID era, and now getting into other such political animals and other things to where we're still in this, like, I just want a level of escape and entertainment to go with my Oscar films. It's not this, like, and that's why do you think it came down to Conclave and Anora in a sense, right? Because it's like the dark indie comedy with sexuality to it and some fun, and then Conclave, which is hilarious, by the way, that it's like the sexy movie with the Pope movie on the other side. But in a sense, that's such a straight, almost procedural, like novel, adaptation, like a popular novel adaptation. Like that's, again, it's pop, right?
Yeah. I think I was going to say we, but I won't speak for you or, us as a collective. I'll say this, and maybe other people will agree with me, have to start rethinking what it is to be a Best Picture winner. I think I'm 33 years old. I'm very much stuck in when I used to stay up without my parents knowing when I was younger and watch the Oscars. And it would be those very sort of, Oscar-y, heavy, gritty, dramatic films, whereas now, perfect to bring it up, Everything Everywhere All at Once, by the way, which is a film that I absolutely hated. I mean, Anora, I really appreciated it as an art form. Everything Everywhere All at Once, I thought was an abomination. And I'm being perfectly honest. Look, I'll always give my opinion.
Of course,
Congratulations to the cast, to the directors. They won Best Picture, director. Jamie Lee Curtis won. But I personally hated the film. And I remember leaving the theatre thinking, I'll tell you one thing, that can't win Best Picture. And it did. And I watched the trailer.
And it swept in like a big way, too.
Yep. And then I watched the trailer for Anora, and I came out, and I said to myself, that can't win Best Picture. So I think I have to rethink what a Best Picture winner is, because last year when Oppenheimer, I was one, well, we're back to where we belong. That's a Best Picture winner. And actually, I think what people want from a Best Picture is changing. And like you say, maybe people don't want the bummer anymore. And I think it's really important to not underestimate, look, Oppenheimer was going to win, and I think it would have won 9 out of 10 years in Best Picture. But I do think that the Barbenheimer helped Oppenheimer over the line in Best Picture, because Oppenheimer was a heavy movie and it was pretty grim at times.
And long, obviously, for all the people complaining about the Brutalist,
not Nolan's best film, but being tagged along with Barbie and everything that became in the award season sort of made Oppenheimer a bit of a lighter sort of experience, not necessarily to watch, but to talk about, to vote for. But Best Picture is changing, and what it takes to win Best Picture is changing. And I'll need to learn from that going forward. I'll need to view films with a much broader set of goggles on than I have, because for me, Conclave was what felt like the Best Picture winner. I never thought Emilia Perez would win anyway. Once there was the tweet scandal, that goose was absolutely cooked, and I think that was proven tonight. The fact that it couldn't win international feature, which, by the way,
I guess that would be probably the other shock of the night, besides Mikey Madison.
Yeah, well, actually, in the last couple of weeks, it's not been a shock, because in terms of the betting, I'm Still Here became the betting favourite. But for a film to be nominated for 13 Oscars, including Best Picture, and in many of the major categories, and not even be favourite to win international feature, was just mind-blowing. And bear in mind, before the scandal, it was a heavy negative favourite. Like international feature, Emilia Perez, it's done. Scandal happens, and it's been weak in the betting ever since. So I did think I'm Still Here would win, and I did actually back I'm Still Here as well. So I made a bit of money there. But
I was stupid. I went flow on that one because I thought there was going to be this cascading thing of like, again, going with the bummers
Yeah.
away kind of thing. I was just like, all right, Wild Robot can win animated and then Flow will win Best International. Like, just thinking about human nature, but I was wrong. I was hoping for it, but I was wrong.
Yeah. So yeah, Emilia Perez obviously had essentially been out of it for a while. And I said on Mike, and Oscar, and I stand by it, as much as I hate to say it, and it pains me, not all Academy members watch all the films.
Right.
And The Brutalist was long. I mean, it had an interval.
Yes.
And don't get me wrong, Brody is brilliant. It's a fantastic film, but it's a long film and it's not for everyone. And I always thought, and I said on Mike and Oscar, if it won Best Picture, it would have been, I think, the 4th longest film ever to win Best Picture. With some, all-time great films in terms of
like
length
Gone
and
with
stature.
the Wind, Lawrence of Arabia, that kind of...
Yes.
No, yeah.
Above it. So that was always in trouble. So we were really left between Conclave and Anora. And essentially, I think Anora was more wacky, more, I don't know, hip. Is that a word? More sort of...
Yeah.
Conclave, again, whilst it wasn't a bummer, it wasn't exactly a light watch. It was a great film, but it was a difficult watch at times.
Yeah, I wonder if we're going to go back and when we assess this year, we're just going to be like the perfect storm for Anora to win. Because if you look, it's like, okay, if you take the Emilia Perez controversy, you take the Brutalist controversy, the AI stuff and the language, all that stuff, and you take that, not to mention its length. It's like, so those are like 2 of your biggest competitors.
Yeah.
You have Dune Part 2, where they announced Dune Part 3, so people are like, we'll take care of it later down the road. Wicked is Part 1 of 2. They could say the same thing to that. So what is that? Half the class is gone. Then you're going against something like I'm Still Here, International, not going to probably compete on this level. That's a very rare commodity. So, and then Nickel Boys, a very small film, didn't have a lot of nominations outside of Best Picture. So it's like, that's most of the nominees. So you're literally like almost paring it down by attrition to Anora and Conclave. And that's wild to me that it kind of just gets down to that, just because who's coming through Oscar season clinging. Everybody gets, stuff thrown at them, but they couldn't really do that with Anora, right?
Yeah, you make some great points there, and one of them was about Dune Part 2. I mean, firstly...
Which, by the way, my Head and Shoulders, I think, is the best movie of the 10, but I'm apparently on... Which, even if you go on, like, I will swear I get off my my soapbox for Letterboxd, but, like, it's got, I think, the highest score, or close to the highest score of all of them. So this is not some movie that just isn't liked. It's some also ran. This isn't Emilia Perez where like it has its champions and it has like a 2.5 on Letterboxd. Like that was insane. So like this, I think it has like a 4.4. Like this is one of the like most beloved movies by scoring for general audiences. And it was like, we'll give it a couple of Viz stuff and we'll get to it later.
Yeah, but essentially 2 things went wrong for Dune Part 2. And bear in mind, when I went on Mike and Oscar in the summer, it was favourite to win Best Picture back in August. And not only was it favourite to win Best Picture, it was the shortest price betting favourite at that time of year that I'd ever seen in Oscars history. Like it was a heavy favourite. It was shorter. Dune Part 2 was shorter in the betting to win Best Picture in August than Conclave was tonight. But two things did for Dune Part 2. One is how long ago it came out.
March is tough.
Yeah. It's about the worst release you could get. It literally came out after last year's Oscars, so it seemed like it came out 12 years ago.
But Everything Everywhere All at Once was also like late March, early April. So
True. However, the second point, is that Everything Everywhere All at Once didn't announce we're making another film in the middle of the campaigning of award season. Like as much as it, in my opinion, I'm with you. Like, I mean, I thought Dune Part 2 was brilliant. I prefer the first one, but that's a conversation for another day. However, it shouldn't work like this. It should be we will vote for the best film on the ballot. Unfortunately, I think Dune Part 2 suffered with, well, the third one's coming out and we will crown it in all its glory then. So therefore we'll just ignore it this year. We'll give it, sound, and we'll give it, some other things, pat it on the back, and we'll see you in 2 years when the next one comes out. But essentially, it came out a long time ago, so people had somewhat forgotten about it. And then the only reminder they got was, oh, by the way, the third one's coming out, so you can vote for that in 2 or 3 years' time. So, again, I think Dune Part 2 is a perfect example of a film in an alternative universe. You could easily see that winning Best Picture this year, easily. If it had been a later release, if they hadn't announced the third film coming out, if it had been campaigned differently, might have been a different story. I do hope the third one is as good as the first two, and I do hope it sees some substantial wins in terms of acting, directing, picture, because I think you're almost then rewarding all three of the films. We've seen that with Lord of the Rings, that kind of thing happened before. So, yeah,
it's a tough one. And the other thing I'm trying to wrap my mind around is, like, we go through this every year. And especially with the new Academy, it's always like, okay, we have this extra European component, right? This, like, what do the Europeans like? What are all these new Academy members like, right? And we always go like, all right, well, this branch is big. This branch is big. There's no consensus this year between any of the. There's nothing to where I go and point to, and even BAFTA. BAFTA is like, I can't trust them, and I'm not saying that of anything of your people whatsoever. But all these, like, smaller committee things, how are we supposed to judge that? Because it's not a consistent voting body stuff. It's these smaller committees voting, like, on things individually, and it's like, how could we get behind or learn anything when it kind of seems different every year?
I mean, I would say you can't, in many ways, trust BAFTA. And I know it sounds strange, but the Wallace and Gromit win almost sort of epitomizes that. Like, Wallace and Gromit is adored over here in England, like it's a national treasure. But if you look at the award season through a wider lens, the only place that Wallace and Gromit, Vengeance Most Foul, performed well was at BAFTA. And it was basically, the English sort of patting themselves on the back. So BAFTA's going to BAFTA, people say, and they do throw out curveballs, but I do think sometimes the BAFTAs in particular can make things a little bit more confusing. And I do think BAFTA is still, and we saw with Conclave winning there, I think BAFTA is closer to Old Academy, much closer to Old Academy than to New Academy. Like, look how successful Anora was tonight, compared to the night it would have had at the BAFTAs.
I don't see where that's. How does that jive though? It's like, if we're adding more of these European members, and the stuff that gets voted in and wins seems to be different than Old Academy stuff. It seems to have its own kind of, or like there are no rules, instead of like, oh, we know what a Oscar movie looks like in the Old Academy. And it's like, now I'm like, I don't like, the closest thing I can get to a golden rule is take the bums out. But I think that's circumstantial to the time period more than it is like an academy, like academy body makeup thing. I think it's just like more in nominations than wins. Is that fair? Because I mean, like there's always at least one or two foreign film, like, international films in Best Picture now. That seems to be like, this is going to happen every year, right? Like Anatomy of a Fall last year and Zone of Interest and things of that. Like those things, and consistent stayed with it this year. I think that's going to continue as a trend. But outside of that, I can't get a grip on anything.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. And I think, like I said earlier, me having to rethink what it is to be a Best Picture winner, what it takes to be a Best Picture winner. I suppose
Yeah.
as you see the American Academy become sort of more broad and diverse, and the British Academy as well, we don't have enough data yet really to sort of pick the meat off the bones.
Yeah.
I think I'm victim of growing up in an era where there was, at BAFTA and at Oscar, a very stereotypical Oscar winner in
Yeah.
terms of Best Picture, and we have seen that change. You talk about Coda, you talk about Everything Everywhere All at Once, you talk about Parasite. It's in the recent years, it hasn't become the abnormality; it's become the norm, actually, hasn't it? For the sort of more quirky, left field
Yeah.
film to come away the winner. The Oppenheimer has been the exception. This sort of more,
Yeah.
staple old school Academy kind of movie. What it means next year, I have absolutely no idea. It's just
Well, it's going to be Wicked Part 2, right? No, I'm just kidding.
Well,
I-
is that good? When's that coming out?
November, I think.
Oh wow, and that's a good time to come out. And November's a great
Yeah.
slot for award season.
Yeah.
This is my kind of chat, though. We're literally just off the back of this year's Oscars, and we're already talking about next year. Like we love our Oscars when we're already looking forward to Oscars 2026 and 2027 with June, the third part of that trilogy. So
Yeah, I mean, next year, like, you can look to, there's a PTA movie, there's Wicked Part 2. There, like, you can almost pick, like, half of what, unless something's, like, tragically bad, like Joker 2 getting shouted out tonight. That was pretty funny. But I think, for the most part, you could probably kind of see where things are going. But the way, unless it's something like Oppenheimer that just kind of, like, the perfect set of events, I don't think we can safely say, like, oh, these are like the front runners, because like PTA, like, he's never had like the big thing, I don't know. It's tough. He's just not a slam dunk at this stage in his career, and it's kind of like, look at how they treat Martin Scorsese. They'll like give him a lot of nominations and then not really win, especially for his best work, The Departed being the anomaly there, of course. But it's the big auteur. It's like, unless you have some kind of like global reach, that's the thing too. I'm like, what are we ever going to get, like a quintessential like American movie to be that? Like, is Oppenheimer the last gasp of that kind of thing too? I don't know.
No, I don't, and I'm glad you mentioned Martin Scorsese, because I was about to do that as well. I mean, I can remember when the betting markets opened for the Oscars in the coming year, where The Irishman was favourite. Everyone, it's Martin Scorsese. It's going to be a masterpiece. The Irishman's going to win. That didn't end well. And then Killers of the Flower Moon. Leonardo DiCaprio, unrecognizable in Killers of the Flower Moon. It's gonna win a million Oscars, and Martin Scorsese is gonna fly out of the Kodak Theatre on a jetpack, and it's like what I've started to learn now is that particularly in the last 5 years, more often than not, those, this is a banker, they don't often tend to be. They might be nominations juggernauts, and they might, get 8, 9, 10, double digit nominations, but they're going home more often than not near enough empty-handed. And Emilia Perez is a completely different kind of film, but for the number of nominations it had, the amount of awards it went home with, it can only have been incredibly disappointed.
Honestly, I think outside of like the potential to win something like maybe, I don't know, editing or something like that, I think this was a pretty good night for Netflix and Emilia Perez. I mean, like, yes, would they have won an international feature? Of course. But that's like kind of the cost of doing business. I just think they were definitely going to win the two that they won anyway. And they may have gotten one or two others if not for the scandal. But I think they weren't going to win Best Picture. Even though, again, like they had a lot of like, they were the front runner at certain points in the Oscar season and everything. I get it. But, it never really, it had its good night with the Globes, and they'll think back on that fondly.
Mm.
But,
Yeah.
it's not like, again, it's kind of weird when you think like, all right, Anora, that character is Mikey Madison. Like, she's the whole movie. And she, of course, now won Best Actress. I don't think anyone was voting for Carla Sofia Gascon in that same way at any point in the season. So that might have told you something already, that it's like either A, you're telling me that it's not her movie, or you're telling me that the movie's not strong enough because she's not getting the love that Mikey Madison or Demi Moore was getting throughout the season.
Yeah, I think you're right in terms of, with the context of what's happened, Emilia Perez is probably relatively satisfied with the 2 it's won. What I was more hinting at is, if at the start of the season you'd have said you're going to get 13 Oscar nominations but only win 2 and you're going to lose international feature, they'd have probably have said, good Lord, what happened during the campaign? And then someone would have been like, well, I hate to tell you, but and the Mikey Madison win epitomizes the value of hindsight, because sitting here now, and I'm sure every other Oscars commentator and pundit will go, do you know what? That makes absolute sense. She is the film. She carries it. There is no film without her performance. So it makes sense. But we get very caught up in the precursors, and we convince ourselves that, well, because Moore won here and here, then she has to win Oscar. Whereas I think the reality was, in that category, that it became very evident early in the night that Anora was very, very popular. If Anora is popular, then it's not going to be rocket science to work out that Mikey Madison's going to be popular. And in what was probably an incredibly tight race, she's just got over the line. And it makes sense with hindsight. But, we don't have a time machine. If we did, I would obviously go back and bet my entire life savings on Mikey Madison, but unfortunately that's not the reality that we live in.
Does the Demi Moore loss mean anything to you? Like, does it signal that, like, we're just done with the It's Time storyline? Because I can't remember the last time where it was like, oh, we got to give it to so and so, and that worked. Like Judy, maybe, like Renee Zellweger.
Great question, and I'm glad you asked it. The It's Time narrative is one that I'm guilty of saying on podcasts, and I will continue to say. I mean, did the It's Time narrative in some way die with Glenn Close?
That's what I'm saying. Like, she didn't get it. So, how, and what was The Wife? How many years ago now? I'm trying to remember which.
The Wife was the year that Olivia Colman won The Favorite.
Right.
I think that's probably 5 years ago now.
Yeah, I think that was 2018.
It may well be
something like that. 2019.
It's a fair while back, but I mean, Glenn Close was an incredibly short price betting favorite. Everyone had her on the ballot. Olivia Colman caused an upset, and everyone sort of spouted throughout the whole award season, including myself. By the way, I was the main culprit of It's Her Time. Try telling that narrative to Diane Warren. And I'm being deadly serious when I say, like, this has got to stop. It almost upsets me. Like, I can't quite understand how is it possible for someone to be nominated for 16 Oscars and for the Academy to say 16 times you're good enough to be nominated, but not good enough to win. Like, so if, the It's Time narrative, it's hard to say that maybe that isn't dead, because look at Diane Warren. I'm convinced she will win, and all next award season, if she's nominated, I'll say it's time, and Diane Warren's going to win. But maybe that narrative, maybe Academy voters just don't think the way that Oscars pundits do, and they just look at the favorite performance or song of the year. I mean, I do think 16 nominations should be taken into account. Mikey Madison, 1 Oscar nomination, 1 win. Diane Warren, 16 nominations, 0 wins. And for some people, that won't quite sit right. But, it is what it is.
Yeah. So just to kind of wrap things up, and I appreciate your time and staying into the late night, early morning, oversee. Like, it's just, you're the man. You're just the man to make this happen. So I appreciate it. Win count just for everybody, just to kind of get a sense of what the evening looked like. 5 for Anora, 3 for the Brutalist, 2 for Wicked, 2 for Amelia Perez, 2 for Dune Part 2, 1 for The Substance, 1 for Conclave, and 1 for Real Pain. I think it's as spread out as we all thought this was. I think just Anora just ended up getting just enough momentum to kind of just have a little bit more meat on the bone. So I think, I don't think there's going to be a lot of lessons from tonight. I think it was such a spread out year that I would love to see the voting totals on these, wouldn't you? Just to see, like, I'm sure it's so close. And I think the big thing for me, if it came down to Anora and Conclave, the one thing I was like, if Ray Fiennes and Stanley Tucci, like all those guys, like, if they didn't get any awards wins really throughout the season, that were like BAFTA may have had something. I'm trying to remember now because I know they won Best British Film and whatever, but they didn't. Ray Fiennes he didn't win Best Actor, did he?
No,
is that Adrian Brody, right?
Yeah,
So that's where, to me, I'm like, if the center of your movie is not really winning anywhere, then that's probably a big problem because it's not really working out. And especially over these last few years, because we've seen a lot of like sweeps, we've seen a lot of, everybody, like all the main focus people, Frances McDormand, go on and on, like they all kind of the center of the frame wins. Like Coda was like the biggest outlier, I guess, of that. But yeah, so this, I think it was just a spread out year. The the precursors were all over the place. I don't think anyone could get a good shake. There were multiple controversies. There were multiple franchise films that could get overlooked to get to their next one. I don't know. I think it's just a bonkers year. Kudos to Conan O'Brien because that audience didn't deserve him. I thought he did a really great job. The sandworm bit had me every time. I could have gone for 3 or 4 more of those. They had great touches with the Quincy Jones stuff. The Gene Hackman, the In Memoriam was, well done. The When Harry Met Sally reunion and the fact that Billy Crystal means so much to the Oscars, I think that was a great idea. Anything else stand out for you as we draw this Oscars to a close?
Yeah, so on my notes, which I made during the ceremony there, I did put about the sandworm on the piano. I thought that was fantastic.
Yeah, it's
and on the I think it was
the harp.
Was it a harp as well?
Yeah.
It was like so good. We've got to do it twice.
Yes.
Look, Conan was great. I thought all of his humor was good. And I actually put in my notes that I liked some of the darker stuff. I liked some of those harder hitting jokes. I mean, they weren't like Ricky Gervais level awkward, but he said a few things that the way he delivered them was great. But when you make jokes like some of the jokes he made, if you don't deliver them well, they can fall flat on their ass. And I thought he delivered them great. I thought the Ben Stiller bit for, I think it was production design, I thought that was hilarious. And overall, I thought the whole thing was pretty good. What I liked was I did like the way they celebrated some of the craft categories. However, I do think you are absolutely spot on that did cost the show at the end of the night. Director, by the way, how quickly did they rush through that?
Yeah, and that killed me because we just went through like cinematography got the full, costume design got the full, makeup and hair, and then all of a sudden director is like, whoops, look at the time.
Yeah, director was literally Quentin Tarantino presenting, which was weird in itself.
Yeah, sure.
Sort of, these are the nominees, here are the winners. It was, and then even actress felt a bit rushed. And again, Best Picture felt a bit rushed. And look, I'm there's no such thing as a perfect Oscars ceremony, but I think there was lots of positives. There was a few things that needed to be tightened up a little bit. Overall, it was pretty good. I mean, like you said, it was a year where the awards were spread around, but Anora had a great night. They couldn't have had a better night, really. And yeah, it was a great end to a enthralling award season, and I'm looking forward to doing it all again next year.
Yeah, absolutely, my friend. Like, and the one backlash that we might hear won't be about Amelia Perez or the Brutalist or any of those things anymore. It'll be possibly the fact that, and I don't know if you had any issues overseas. I was watching the telecast on Hulu, and they made a big deal like, oh, they have all these streaming options. With 2 awards left in the ceremony, it cut out. It kicked me out.
Yeah.
It was like, the stream is done. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
So they need to get their stuff together if they want to do this better going forward. Because that's, like, yes, Netflix has some stuff to clean up with the SAGs and everything else. But at least, like, you didn't have any interruptions and it didn't feel like rushed off or anything too much in a ceremony like that. That's a big problem if we're going to start bridging the gap and going forward with this mix of network, and stream, like linear and streaming.
Yeah, so we didn't have any issues over here. It was on terrestrial television, so on ITV, one of our main channels. But I was on X and I was keeping up to date with what everyone was sort of tweeting out, and I saw that there were issues with Hulu and the streaming. Which I believe were because of the fact that the show went longer than they predicted. I think that's why the stream.
Yeah.
Which again, like,
it's a live event though. Just let it ride. What are we doing?
It's like, what are you doing? Like, you know, the fact that you're streaming a live event and then you're saying, well, actually, we're gonna cut the stream now because we've run out of time is absurd to the point where like somebody should be fired. Like, But
imagine if that was a live sporting event.
Oh yeah. You can't see the fourth quarter because the the halftime break was a bit longer than normal. So that's all, folks. And Bugs Bunny comes out and waves. It's like, what a shambles.
Yeah. So that might end up being the controversy that actually lingers on as we go forward with the rest of the Oscars. But thank you so much, man, for staying up late with me. I'm a little tired and punchy. I can imagine where your head is at. So thank you so much for staying up into the wee hours with me. Give a shout out, anything you want to plug. I know you'll probably be either on MMO sometime soon or any of these other endeavors that you do. So please tell the people where they can find you.
Yeah, firstly, Andrew, thank you for having me on. Always love chatting to you. You're a great guy. You become a good friend, and I really appreciate the invite. And honestly, it's a privilege to be on here. It might be 5 a.m, but you're a good man to spend 5 a.m. with. So,
That's what the ladies tell me. I just killed David.
He has officially killed me. Don't edit that cough out. That was a cough of joy. So thank you very much for having me on. You can follow me on X at @1DavidLong. My podcast, Film is Worth It, is at Film is Worth It on X as well. We're not putting out any new content, but there's 4 or 5 years content on there if you ever want to listen to some old movie reviews. I'm still guesting on MM&O and a few other things, and always open to guest on any podcast. So if you're a podcaster and you'd like to have me on, it would be my pleasure. Yeah. No, it's great to talk films, and it's great to talk Oscars, and it's been a blast, and I really appreciate you having me on, and I look forward to doing it all again next year.
Absolutely. Have you looked? Because you are the Duke of Bettingham. I believe, what was it? Was it 2 years ago you said you put money on like Barbie or something like way early, like a year ahead? What was that one?
Oh, there's been too many early bets to... I mean, the best one I've ever had, where I did live up to my name, was Brendan Fraser. And the funny thing about that is I backed Brendan Fraser from the summer all the way until October for the London Film Festival, and I went to see The Whale, and I hated it. I didn't actually particularly like Brendan Fraser's performance, and I walked out of that theatre as white as a ghost, and I thought, I can't tell the truth. So I spent the rest of award season like, Brendan Fraser's a genius. It was the best performance I've ever seen. He's going to win the Oscar, and I still thought he would win the Oscar. But bear in mind, I preferred Austin Butler, but I backed him consistently for 12 months. He ended up winning. I won a huge amount of money. That was very, very nice. Doesn't always happen like that. But maybe next year we'll go in hard and early on something. What it will be, I don't know. But as soon as I do, I will let you know.
hard and early the title of the Duke of Bettingham sex tape. Congratulations. We've now completely gone off the rails. I appreciate I did. I appreciate you, buddy. I love you to death. Good to see you. We'll have you back on again. Always love talking film, Oscars, everything. It isn't Oscars unless I'm talking to you. So I appreciate it. Appreciate you coming on. And everybody go check out David Long and all his appearances. And for all the questions that we said of oh, what are the trends, all this stuff, you can go back and listen to Road to the Oscars on that feed and get a sense of what it was like back in those prior years. And maybe we can all learn something to get better at our bets. Right, David?
Absolutely. Yeah, you were a regular guest on Road to the Oscars, and we had some deep dives. You're right. It'd be fascinating listening back to those now, because they are like little time capsules of history. Because like we've said in this show, the Academy's changing, time's changing. We've got to learn to move with the times. And thanks again, Andrew. It's been an absolute blast. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, David.